Welcome to the 9th episode of the TerpTalk Young Terps Podcast, presented by Viner Consulting. This is your host, Mason the Intern Viner.
Your co-host, Jordan Viner.
And your sometimes guest, TerpTalk's Wayne Viner.
And today on the TerpTalk Young Terps Podcast, we will be talking about Maryland football and the first half of the Maryland basketball schedule. But first, a big NBA trade happened today.
Yeah, it was, of all the big trades this offseason, maybe the biggest one yet. And for those of you who don't know yet, Kyrie Irving was traded for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, and a couple of picks, and what may be one of the biggest scams of the offseason.
Well, I personally...
Scam? Why do you call it a scam?
I feel like a Kyrie Irving and Isaiah Thomas are almost equals, but the Celtics also gave up the best contract in the NBA with Jay Crowder and a few of their coveted picks.
Well, what I heard was that the Celtics were being run really well with getting all these draft picks, but then they traded probably the most valuable pick in the whole NBA this year, which is the Brooklyn Nets first rounder.
They traded that one?
Yes, they did. Mason, why in the world would you do that?
I don't really understand it, but I guess it's a win-now move. Kyrie seems to come in the clutch, but remember, before LeBron, Kyrie really wasn't playing that well.
Yeah, this is not a move I anticipated. Danny Ainge runs the Celtics really well, and they stockpile all these picks. So you'd think they'd be able to get something back just for the picks. But instead, this seems like a bit of a desperation move. I don't know why they're desperate, though.
I guess they want to win now. You think they're scared of the Wizards?
I don't know what they're scared of. That's the thing. They were set up to compete with the Cavs this year, and they just made it not much better for themselves, and also giving up major assets for the future.
I mean, what does Jay Crowder bring to the Cleveland Cavaliers? Of course, he is a small forward, but you're looking at a team that has LeBron James. Why would they go for Jay Crowder as the second guy in that trade? But if you remember this last year's draft, the Celtics also picked up Jason Tatum, who will be a small forward.
Okay,
well, he's not going to start. The wings are so crowded at the Celtics. But I'm not sure what the Celtics were doing here. I don't really understand it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, so that's from a Celtics point of view. For me, the Cleveland Cavaliers just traded away their point guard. Who plays point guard in Cleveland?
Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah Thomas.
He's not a fourth quarter. He wasn't even a fourth quarter guy against the Wizards. He was too small. He doesn't play defense. You're going to win with that?
That's what they're hoping
Apparently.
for, but they definitely picked up a lot of assets in this trade. And even if they don't like Isaiah Thomas this year, they can always trade him and use the pick that they got, the Nets pick, to pick a top-of-the-line point guard.
Well, this kind of pulls into what everybody's been talking about recently, which is the post-LeBron age, which is coming in, or it seems like it's coming, in Cleveland. This almost seems like a stockpile move. They're trading away Kyrie Irving, which may be their best win-now option, for Isaiah Thomas, whose contract is expiring, and some first-round picks. So maybe you can look at like that for the Cavs.
Well, this isn't
That's just one side of it.
This isn't an NBA podcast, so on to Maryland football and another year, another quarterback dispute. Here we go again. And today we got to look at practice, and Caleb Henderson did not participate, but we did get to see Tyrell Pigrome, Kasim Hill, and Max Bortenschlager.
Yes, we did. That was an interesting thing to actually go out and see practice and feel the guys run by you. Did you feel the energy out there, Mason?
Well, I've been to, I guess, a few practices in my day, none very recently, but this one had a different kind of edge, and I always talk about the edge to win now that this staff and these guys believe in. It's all about winning now. It's not for the future. It's what can we do to get better right now.
Okay.
Well, this is not what I expected from this quarterback battle. I thought Caleb Henderson was going to start, but obviously it's not the case.
Hey, he can't start. He's hurt. He can't. He hobbled his way out there with a walking boot on, And I give it to him for getting dressed and making the effort. But the guy hurt his foot. He had foot surgery and just hasn't gotten better. Of the three guys that you mentioned, then you saw a fourth kid out there. Where's number 16? Who was that, Mason?
That was Ryan Brand, and I believe that if he was able to play this year, he is a transfer from Arizona, so he will not be able to play this year. If he was able to, I believe that he was the starter. He had so much side-to-side speed. He just looked like the best option, but again, he can't play this year, so it's not that much of a factor.
So these quarterbacks all bring something different to the table. You know, Piggy seems like a scramble first guy. What does Kasim do that makes him stand out that's different than the other guys?
I've personally thought his footwork and mechanics were definitely his number one thing, and his arm he is a guy who can stand in there and throw the ball all over the field, but still has a little bit of a scrambling aspect.
So does he fit the mold of the traditional quarterback?
Oh, yes. He is a real legit quarterback. Last year, Dwayne Haskins didn't come to Maryland, and I've heard he's doing good things at Ohio State now. And we go out and get Kasim Hill, that to me is a very similar player. He can run it, he can throw it, he can throw it deep, he understands football. And I was talking to Keith Kavanaugh, and that film is up on the TerpTalk website, about the 1A, 1B thing. Sometimes, especially in the pros, if you say two quarterbacks, you don't have any. But in college, it's not like that. I think you can play Piggy, although I'm still surprised that he's in the mix because I didn't really see him as a leader-type quarterback. And I look at Kasim Hill, and I see that. We all like Bortenschlager, but he doesn't have the scrambling ability. So Borty probably is going to lose out in this battle. But you have to remember that Max Bortenschlager was committed to Buffalo before Walt Bell got him to come to Maryland.
Well,
Mason, are you comfortable with a 1A, 1B?
No, personally, I'm a believer in the pro words, as you said, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any. Piggy has amazing abilities when he gets out to the edges of the field, and that's where I see him coming in the future. I see him changing to, as you said when we were in the car today, wingback, where he can just get out on the edges and make amazing plays, especially if you throw a lateral to him, then he can throw it or run it.
Jordan, are you comfortable with a team that comes out in college with two quarterbacks?
I think it can work to a degree. I think that you need to have a one. You really need to have a one, but you can factor in the two. You know, it's kind of like the Wildcat in the NFL where you can throw in a two just for something different. So, and people say, well, then if you put in this case, Piggy, well, they're going to know you're going to try to run the ball with the quarterback. That's not necessarily true. Then you could even put another layer of confusion on him and put a deep ball or something. I think it can work, but you need to have a one.
Well, we'll see if somebody emerges. In the pre-practice press conference, Coach Durkin said he's going to take all the time that he has, all the time that he needs. He's not going to rush to make a decision. Somewhere out there, and I'm even talking about the first week in Texas, you're going to see Kasim Hill on the field. This isn't a guy that they're going to redshirt. We also talked about the difference in size, and I watched that offensive line work. Those guys are huge. Mason, impressive, or are you still in a wait-and-see mode?
Wait and see, as always with a football team, you know. They can always look like Tarzan, but it matters if they play like Jane or not. With these guys, I really don't know what's going to happen, but whatever I see, it's really a big deal if they put out Kasim, because you really want to protect him. He's more of a guy who's going to want to stand in there and go through his progressions and make the right decision. But if you put out Piggy, then you're going to look to get out in space. It's just going to be a completely different thing. I know they're running the same offense, but I see it looking very different depending on what quarterback gets out there.
I think looking is a good way. I know we want to talk about these quarterbacks, at least for a second. We did that. What'd you think of that yellow uniform with the black stripes? Jordan, tell them what I'm talking about.
Well, Maryland released their 125 anniversary football jerseys the other day. They seem to be based around the 1950s look, which they won the championship with, and they are very yellow. Let's go with that.
They're very yellow. Mason, do you like them?
Well, I love them. I mean, I always liked them, though. You know, the only one that I think that I haven't liked that I've seen was the original Black Pride uniform. I really didn't like that one, but this one I like especially because they put out Torrey Smith. You know, we finally saw an alum come back for one of these uniform promo videos. But the one thing I don't like is you can't buy it right now.
It's not a great marketing decision, but it's really cool to see the alumni come back. We've seen a lot more basketball than football these days. So, you know, it's good to see they're finally listening to us.
So there's been a lot of discussion. I know we're up against a break here, but there's been a lot of discussion that it seems that the fans who don't pay very close attention think that yellow uniform with the horizontal stripes is the uniform for the season. It's not, is it?
I don't get if you follow Maryland on any social media platform, which I've seen a lot of this, like, is that the uniform conversation on? They always put out new uniforms. And
just for one game. They're going to wear this for the Indiana game. That's it.
Who knows? If they start winning in it, maybe they'll just ride it out. I like it enough for them to do that. You know, if they just use this...
That uniform that we love that they wore against Penn State and Baltimore, they never put that on again.
Well, I was just going to say, if they wore that uniform and this yellow one, that looks like a football team.
It does. I like it. I like the fact they're still trying. And I'd like to thank you guys for having me on. We'll be back during the season. Of course, we're going to do a special event podcast from Texas. We're all going to be together in Austin. And Viner Forgates, thank you for backing this show. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We know we have hundreds and hundreds of listeners out there. You guys, Jordan and Mason, you're doing a great job. Thanks for having me on. We'll see you in Austin, Texas.
And that was Wayne Viner from the rest of the TerpTalk Retro Productions Network, and we thank him for being on. So now into Maryland's 2017 non-conference basketball schedule. We don't see a lot of compelling games, Jordan.
No, we don't. This has become a recurring issue in the Mark Turgeon era, in that there's not a lot of competitive non-conference games, which pose up problems both for fan interest and for getting the team ready for the Big Ten.
Really, I only see one home game on this schedule that would be a sellout. I mean, Butler maybe becomes a sellout game, but other than that, I mean, they play at Syracuse and they play a tournament out in Florida, but really, where are you going to see big non-conference home games?
Well, that's kind of become the hallmark of the Mark Turgeon non-conference schedule, is there's not many big games. It seems like he'd rather win the not-so-difficult games than play really big-name games.
I just see that Mark Turgeon always wants to be blank in 2 or blank in 1 going into the conference schedule. It's really disappointing at this point that you have these teams that are preseason ranked and then they don't play anybody. It seems like it's time for him that he's gotten to the program at a point where they can play big teams in the non-conference.
Well, that's the thing. Maryland has really become a basketball powerhouse, but they're not scheduling like it. They're not playing big-name games in the pre-conference schedule. Now, something that a lot of people are kind of weirded out by is the structure of our schedule this season.
Yeah, they play a tournament, the Emerald Coast Classic, then the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and then they play Purdue and at Illinois, which are 2 Big Ten games, and then they go back to 4 non-conference games before the conference schedule goes all the way after that.
It's actually 5. And the reason for this weird scheduling thing where they're playing 2 games in early December and then going back to non-conference is because of the Big Ten's questionable at best move to move the Big Ten tournament to MSG. And because the Big East tournaments are already at MSG, they need to play a week early. So they have to split into 2 conference games earlier in the schedule.
Well, that's just, I mean, I don't know if it's bad, but I really don't know I don't really have words for that. It's just something that they're going to have to live with. The Big Ten moving to MSG is questionable, as you said. But let's get into the schedule. And the Terps come out and play at Stony Brook, at Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which is going to be a really cool game. And if you're into the NHL or really just sports history, you would know this stadium from the New York Islanders. It's just going to be a cool event. I wish it was the weekend where Maryland plays Rutgers at Yankee Stadium. That would make a whole sports weekend, but it's just 1 week before that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Before that, they played an exhibition game, so if you want to see a cheap ticket, that'll be one. They play Ralph Macton, a PA, small school. So after Stony Brook, they play probably the game, at least for a good amount of time, the game of the year at Xfinity Center versus Butler in the Gannett Games.
Yeah, you get a team that's really had a lot of success recently. Last season, they were 22-11, and it's just a team that always seems to have guys that can just play the college basketball game well.
Well, Butler's had a lot of success under Chris Mack, who, as some of you know, departed to Ohio State after last season. But they look to keep a lot of continuity. They like their new coach, whose name's escaping me right now. But the returning core of Butler is still here, and I expect them to be a contender in the Big East next year.
Well, they return a really interesting story. If you follow the NBA draft, they had a guy by the name of Keelan Martin, who was their top scorer this past season. He is a 6'7" forward, which is an NBA type, who said in an interview that he had zero interest leaving Butler before his senior season.
Yeah, and he's back. He's had a great year last year, got 16 points a game and 5 rebounds. He is their absolute key player, and Maryland's given a hard time covering him. I expect Justin Jackson to get the assignment. They're very similar players, but I think Keelan Martin, unfortunately, will be a problem. He is a really great college basketball player.
The next guy of note for the Butler Bulldogs is Kamar Baldwin, a point guard who had a really good freshman year, 10 points a game, but only got 1.5 assists. He's looking to work on that. And it's just this Butler thing that they have 4-year guys who really succeed by the last year they have at Butler.
Well, it's just what they call the Butler way. It's how they succeed. They get 4-year guys, except for a few exceptions like Gordon Hayward, and they build and they succeed. And I appreciate Butler and the basketball-focused Big East. I really do. They feel like basketball's priority, and I like that about them. And personally, I see us losing this game. I think Butler's going to be ranked in the preseason, and I think we're going to lose like somewhere around 80-70.
Well, it's a game at Xfinity Center, and if Maryland doesn't really lose that much at home, and it's definitely going to be a good crowd. It's on a Wednesday night. It's probably, actually it is the biggest non-conference home game that the Terps will have. I have them winning that game just because they seem to always win the big home games, especially in the non-conference. I have Maryland topping the Bulldogs 75-72, and with a raucous crowd at Xfinity Center. After that, the Terps play 2 home games against Bucknell and Jackson State. I have them winning both of those.
I agree. I think we're going to win both those games. I think Jackson State's a bit of a sleeper, maybe trap game, if any of them, but I don't see it happening.
After that, you're looking for Maryland to get maybe 2 mid non-conference wins. St. Bonaventure, they always seem to be tough, and TCU or New Mexico. That will be the Emerald Coast Classic tournament in Florida.
Yep, that's our non-conference tournament this season. It's a bit of a lame one, to be honest. But, these are some okay opponents. St. Bonaventure plays in the A-10. They don't do badly in it. I think we're going to win the game, though. TCU with Jamie Dixon is very interesting this season. They may make a tournament push. I see us winning them. New Mexico, though, I love their home stadium in the Pit. I really wish we were playing there instead of the Emerald Coast Classic. But I think a game could be a loss for us. They're a tough team. They always play really hard. But I have us winning that one too. So next is the biggest game probably in our conference schedule.
Before we move on from that, I think that's going to be a tough time for Maryland, especially because, St. Bonaventure's a really rough team. They've been good in the past, and TCU finished last season extremely strong in the Big 12 tournament. I think a Jamie Dixon coach team's tough.
Yeah, so remember, TCU is on the rise. We should mention that. They won the NIT last year. Jamie Dixon's a good coach. We could lose to them. They are not a soft team. They play like animals, and that is a game we really could lose. So if we look at the next game, which is the ACC Big Ten Challenge, which of course is Syracuse.
So you have the Terps coming out of Florida back-to-back, and this is what's going to make that Syracuse game really tough. Maryland is playing St. Bonaventure on the 24th of November, and then they play again on the 25th, and then they're all the way up in Syracuse, New York on November 27th. That's going to be a tough travel schedule for the Terps, going from South Florida up to Syracuse, New York to play that game. But it's definitely the biggest game for the Terps in the non-conference.
Oh, that is an NBA-style schedule right there. Yeah, that could actually be the do-in for Maryland. Syracuse had a bit of a rough year last year, but they really turned it around in the second half of the season. They'll have to continue that turnaround. And I think they're going to succeed. Jim Boeheim is a great coach, and this will be a hard game. And because of this college schedule, I have us losing this game.
Well, Syracuse did lose their top three producers points-wise. Andrew White III, Tyler Linden, and Tyus Battle are all gone. But as always, they reload.
So they seem to have reloaded to a degree. It's not going to be enough to replace them in production they lost last season, though. Their recruiting class is a lot of 3-stars and headlined by 4-star recruit Markel Dolizaj. I think I pronounced that right, from Slovakia, who's a small forward. So we'll see how he does, if he adapts well. And that's kind of it. Syracuse is not as talented as Maryland this year, but Maryland's travel schedule is going to be a big evener.
This game's going to be up in the air, especially, I really don't know what the Terps have going into this. I mean, Syracuse is a really well-coached team. It's going to be a hostile environment. But come on, this is the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Can ESPN or the two conferences or whoever's planning this throw us a bone here and give us Duke one of these years?
The answer is no. And Syracuse is not a bad game. I mean, it's not like we're getting shafted in this challenge. In our 4 years, we've gotten Virginia, North Carolina, Pitt, and Syracuse. It's a bad slate.
Okay, Pitt has nothing to do with
You're
Maryland. Pitt has nothing to do with Maryland.
You're not going to get a good one every time, Mason. You've got 3 really good matchups in 4 years, and I think we have to just roll with that. We're not going to get Duke anytime soon. It's just not going to happen.
Well, a large Maryland fan contingency. People would love to see Maryland Duke. That would be a largely watched game.
No, Maryland Duke fans would like to see Maryland Duke. I don't know if anybody else would. So, I see your concern. I'm not your complaint with this thing, but ACC is still probably mad at Maryland. We should be, in my opinion, we should be happy with what we have with North Carolina, Virginia. We'll see if we can get anything, I guess. Syracuse. So if we get back on topic here, Syracuse. I think it's going to be an even matchup because Syracuse may be less talented, but Maryland's travel schedule will probably affect them in a big way, big enough that it evens the playing field.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be something to watch. Moving on through this non-conference schedule, it's really cupcakes from here on out. You play, after the Syracuse game, you get the Purdue and Illinois matchups and then you're back to the non-conference. You play Ohio, Gardner-Webb, Catholic, Fairleigh Dickinson, and UMBC. If there's a slip-up there, Jordan, where do you see it?
Well, we're just going to say real fast, we're going to put the Purdue and Illinois in the next podcast as a Big Ten preview. So, but for these games, these 5 non-conference games, it's hard to see a slip-up. None of these schools are really good. I can't believe we're playing Catholic. They're a D3 school.
And if
I had to pick,
if that's a game that you want to see, you can get tickets to the Maryland Catholic game. They are selling for $5.
Wow.
I mean, it's definitely a good. It's definitely a good promo.
Yeah, it is. If I had to pick one game, though, it'd be to slip up with. I guess it'd be UMBC. I think those kids will play with an edge. I think they're gonna be. They probably want to play for Maryland growing up, but they didn't make it. They make by a wide margin in this case. So that's to be the only game I'd really highlight there as an interesting one to watch. But other than that, this is a breeze. I really wish they put another meaningful game in there, but they didn't. So that's just it. This is going to be a weak non-conference schedule. It's going to hurt our tournament seeding or tournament case if we're on the bubble. And I really wish in the future that Mark Turgeon would try to schedule more marquee matchups.
Well, I would love to see Maryland play at UMBC. That's a small building. That place would be overfilled. It would definitely be an interesting dynamic with the fans. That's something that I would pay to see, not so much when it's at College Park where you're going to see thousands of empty seats. I just really wish that they would play another big team or do something like that where it's interesting. But my slip-up game would be Fairleigh Dickinson. I mean, they've made the tournaments a few times. There's also, I just see them losing one of these games this year, sadly. I don't see them being as solid, and when you play all these smaller schools, they're looking for a big win. I mean, some of these would be the biggest win in program history, and that's a lot to play a lot of these teams that are weaker.
Yeah, I see what you mean here. Something else I just noticed in the schedule is this year they do not play a game at the Royal Firms Baltimore, whatever it's called now, arena. They're not playing any game in Baltimore.
Yeah, I really like that game. I know it was big for the people that live in Baltimore, and there are a lot of Terp fans there, but I guess it just didn't make the schedule this year. Yeah, I mean, that's just something you're going to have to live with. It was good to see them play there.
Yeah, that'd be a good place to play your UMBC game. So, I think that's it. This is a week. I wish they gave us a better schedule to talk about. That's kind of what I keep going back to here. But that's all the things to talk about with the non-conference schedule.
So, here's my one thing to watch on this schedule, other than the Butler and Syracuse game, is if they can go down to Florida and win those 2 games, I think it puts them in a good place, because here's the thing that you need to watch with this non-conference schedule, even though it might be boring, is if they go down to Florida and if they don't play any big games in the non-conference and it trickles down to that Selection Sunday, last few spots, they're going to get cut if they lose a game against Jackson State or Gardner-Webb. You know, it's really going to factor in come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, it is, and that's why you schedule these games. You want to see what you got, and you hope it makes a difference. Selection Sunday, quality losses matter, and that's kind of it. So, in this non-conference, I only have us losing one of the 12 games. I have us going 11-1. I have us losing to Butler.
I got us at 11-1, just as you, but a different loss. I see them losing at Syracuse. It's just a tough travel schedule, and it's a tough game, as always. Going on the road against a Power 6 in basketball is tough. So I got the Terps at 11-1, entering the second segment of Big Ten play.
And I think that does it for this TerpTalk podcast. Mason, take us out.
Well, I would first off like to thank you guys for listening to this edition of the TerpTalk Young Terp Podcast. We release podcasts every Saturday, so remember to check out TerpTalk.com for this podcast and all of your Maryland sports needs, and check out what we did at the last open practice of the Maryland football preseason on TerpTalk.com. Thanks for listening.